Alrighty, Shabbat Shalom. Let us start in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before your throne and we bless you and thank you for another wonderful week. We thank you for the blessings you give us. We thank you, Father, for your word and opening up our mind to your truth. We pray, Father, for those who suffer in this world, and we pray your kingdom to this earth as is in heaven. We thank you for your Sabbath that's coming, and we pray we can enter your rest. And we pray, Father, for your true millennial Sabbath that's coming, where all the world will be at peace. So we ask your Spirit to guide and lead this study and to open up our hearts and minds to what you want to share with us. And we give you all praise and honor and glory by the name and by the authority and by the shed blood of your Son, Yeshua Messiah, we pray. Hallelujah. Alrighty, we are back in the book of Daniel. I am back from a very, very good trip to Liberia. I wrote about it already, and I'm working on some video that I'll get out shortly that everybody can see some of the trip. So I won't say too much now. I want to get right into the study. It's been a couple of weeks that we've been off. We started in Daniel 1. I'm not going to recap too much of that. Really just set the stage for starting. But now, in Daniel 2, now we're really getting into the action. And you know, Daniel is a very interesting book because the prophecies in Daniel, I mean, they are just so clear-cut. You know, when you talk to Jewish people with messianic apologetics, many things in Isaiah, they'll go back and forth and they'll argue with you. They'll never argue with Daniel because they can't. The other thing that's interesting about Daniel is, where do you place the book of Daniel? You know, some people put it in the writings, and yet Daniel was a prophet. You know, we put it in the prophets because Yeshua said, as Daniel the prophet said. So that's another aspect of the book. There's a lot of mysteries in the book. And as we'll get into today, it really is a book about the end time. So not to say that Daniel was not an important book for the last, almost 2,600 years. But now, just like Revelation, now the book is unsealed. So it means more now than it ever did before. And we will get into it starting with Daniel chapter 2 and verse 1. It says, in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar was dreaming dreams and his spirit was troubled and his sleep was finished from him. Now, this is a little bit strange because it says it's the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar when this dream is happening. Yet, if we go back to chapter 1 that we did the last time, in verse 5, it says, and the king set to them the portion of a day in its day from the king's food and the wine of his drinking, even to rear them, talking about Daniel and his friends, 3 years, so that at their end they may stand before the king. So it sounds kind of strange if over here it's saying they need to be reared for 3 years, and then we get into chapter 2, and it's the second year of Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel's already coming before him. They don't tell us here, but you could look in the history books, is that Nebuchadnezzar reigned with his father for 2 years. So this is actually when it's saying it's the second year of his reign. It's not taking that into account. And technically it would be his 5th year, and which means it would be Daniel's 4th year of captivity. So it's the 3 years have gone. It's the 4th year of captivity. He's still a young man, but we're going to see a lot is happening in here. Like I said, and I'll go over it when we go over some of these things in chapter 2 and chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9, chapter 11. I am not going to go into very, very detail of the historical aspect of the book of Daniel according to the scholars. If you want that, you can, go online. You could get a book about that. But I do believe Daniel is a dual prophecy, historical from, as we'll see today, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. But as we're also going to see, it's mostly for the end time. That the things that we are talking about in Daniel are primarily for the end time. So those 4 entities were only types of what we're seeing in the end time. So that's what really the book is about. So like I said, as we get into these different, very, very detailed historical aspects, I'm going to touch on them, but I'm not going to go very, very deep into that. I want to talk about more of the end time things that are here, and it's amazing, some of these chapters. And chapter 2 is the beginning of it. This is it. This is the beginning of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and this is what really sets the foundation for what we're doing here in the end time. And then it says, so Nebuchadnezzar was troubled and he couldn't sleep because of this dream he has. And the king said to call for the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and to the Chaldeans to declare to the king his dreams. And they came and stood before the king. So now Daniel is in this group, right, of not necessarily magicians or sorcerers, but he is an astrologer. Talked about that last week some, that Daniel knew because of the prophecy that was in the book of Numbers about there would be a special star that's associated with the Messiah. He gave the 70 weeks prophecy we'll get into when we get into Daniel 9. So he told them about this star, and that's why where did the Magi come from? They come from here. They come from Persia, They come from where he would have been the one telling them. But yet when we look at these other things, magicians are ones who practice necromancy. And sorcerers certainly is not something that's good. Leviticus 19 and verse 31. Leviticus 19 and verse 31. The Torah clearly talks against this. Leviticus 19 and verse 31 says, "You shall not turn to mediums, and you shall not seek to spiritualists to be defiled by them. I am Yahweh your Elohim." So Yahweh is telling us we're not to do this. If you go to chapter 20, right there in verse 6, "And the person who turns to the mediums and the spiritualists to go whoring after them, I shall set my face against that person, will cut him off from the midst of my people." So we know astronomy, which is trying to figure out the spiritual aspect of your life by the stars and the planets, is against Yahweh. It's evil. We know that necromancy and magic and sorcery is evil before Yahweh, like we read. But astrology, which is basically the study of the movement of the planets and the stars, is not something that is against Yahweh. Astronomy is, not astrology. Excuse me. Astronomy is not against Yahweh, which is the study of the planets and the stars. Astrology is the other way. Astrology is where people are looking at horoscopes and thinking their life is somehow being called to that. But it's interesting, the word in Hebrew for astrologer, right, is asherphim in Hebrew, which comes from the root word nafesh. And what is nefesh? Nefesh, right? Nefesh is soul. Nefesh is to breathe, right? Spirit. So it is connected with that word. And probably in the beginning, of course, in Genesis 1, it didn't mean the same thing that it may mean later when people are putting all this mysticism into it. So let's go to verse 3 now. We'll continue with the story. "And the king said to them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. And the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will reveal the meaning." I told this the last time when we were going over Daniel 1, that chapter 1 and 8 through 12 is written in Hebrew. From here, going all the way to chapter 7 is written in Aramaic. So it's very interesting when things are dealing with the Gentiles. It's written in Aramaic, which is actually even a form of Chaldee, the language of Chaldee. And when we see that it's about the Hebrews and the prophecies for restoration of Israel, it's in Hebrew. "The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, The word is certainly gone from me. If you will not make known the dream and its meaning to me, you will be cut into pieces, and your houses shall be made an outhouse. But if you make known a dream, you shall receive gifts and a present and great honor from me before me. Therefore reveal the dream and its meaning to them." So when you really think about this, and Daniel, like I said, in a lot of ways it's a very different book than almost any book in the Bible. And one of the things is this Nebuchadnezzar character here. He's a servant of Yahweh, right? Yahweh is using him to destroy the temple. He's not doing it on his own, but Yahweh, he's even called Yahweh's servant. Although he's certainly a pagan. He's certainly a Gentile and a pagan. And pretty irrational, yet at times he seems very rational. At times he's praising Elohim as the only Elohim in the world, and at times he's getting angry and wants to kill anybody who's against him. And if you remember the message that I gave about President Trump when he first became president, comparing him to Nebuchadnezzar. And wow, now that President Trump, this is his third year in presidency, I really think he's like Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, he is so much like Nebuchadnezzar. It's unbelievable. There's some form of spiritualism to him, yet he's got a really bad temper. He's against his enemies. If he doesn't get his way, you're fired. All this stuff. Now over here, these people, though, with their life, can you imagine? Now, granted, this dream, I'm sure it was terrifying. I'm sure, he was shocked by the dream. But to actually come to these people and say, either you tell me what the dream is or I'll kill you, is pretty radical. As a matter of fact, that's what they say in the next verse. Verse 7, they again replied and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will reveal its meaning. The king answered and said, for I know that you buy time, that on account of all you see the thing is certainly gone from me. But if you will not make the dream known to me, there is one law for you, for you have agreed upon lying and deceiving words to speak before me until the time is changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, that I shall know that you can reveal the meaning to me. The Chaldeans replied before the king and said, there is not a man on earth who can reveal the king's matter, because not any king, master, or ruler has asked such a thing from any magician or conjurer or Chaldean. Which is kind of strange too, that if these people are sorcerers and magicians, even when you look in Egypt, right? When Moses was coming and doing the miracles before Pharaoh, the magicians there were able to duplicate at least some of those miracles. You wonder why. It's by magic, right? By sorcery. But they were. And you wonder why here, their sorcery they couldn't. Which shows you they couldn't have been actually too good as sorcerers. They must have been deceiving the people to a degree. But at the same rate, you also wonder, why would Nebuchadnezzar be so quick to do this, right? Because if he kills all these guys, he certainly isn't going to get his dream told to him. Why wouldn't he say, I'll give you 30 days to tell me the meaning? But he's like, give it to me now or you're all going to die. It just shows the unrationality of him as a leader. And as we get into some of the other stories, particularly the story when he was eating grass for 7 years, we'll compare him more to President Trump and some of the modern day things that are going on here. And it says, and the thing that the king asks is rare, right? And there is no other who may reveal it before the king except the Elohim, whose dwelling is not with flesh. Then the king was enraged and angered, and he commanded all the wise men of Babylon to be destroyed. Can you imagine? And the law went out that the wise men should be killed, and they looked for Daniel and his companions to be killed. So you wonder if Daniel was pretty much the wisest of the wisest, why he wasn't there with these men originally going in. We don't know. But whatever the reason, he's not there. This is going out now, this decree, and now Daniel's going to find out about it. He says, then Daniel, and the law went out that the wise men should be killed, and they looked for Daniel and his companions to be killed. Then Daniel answered with counsel and insight to Arioch, the chief of the king's bodyguard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. So what does Daniel answer? With counsel and insight. Just like I was saying in the message the other week, when we were talking about spiritual gifts and the ones that people have and the ones that are lacking, when we were talking about true judgment. And I said that discernment, out of all the gifts, is the least gift that we see among brethren today. And here's Daniel, a young man, right? He's only probably about 20 years old here, something like that, 20, 21, 22 max. He's finding out they're going to come and kill him, and what is he doing? He's answering with counsel and insight. He's using his wisdom. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's officer, why is the decree so urgent? That's what I was saying. Why so quick? Why not give them time before the king? And Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. And Daniel went in and asked of the king that he would give him time and he would show the king the meaning. And sometimes I think the problem we have today is that we read the Bible, even though we believe the Bible and we believe every story in the Bible, we read it like stories, right? We read it so much and we read it over and we're just reading, and we're not really filling in the picture. We're not really thinking of what's happening here, right? You read Daniel in the lion's den, as we're going to do, when we get to chapter 6, and how great it was, and he had faith in Yahweh. But you're not putting yourself in that situation where it's not a story in a book, where this guy's really there, and if his faith doesn't come through, he's going to be eaten by these lions. And the same over here. I mean, we read past this, right? Daniel went in and asked the king to give him more time and show the king the meaning. Do you realize Daniel's faith to do that? Here's this boy, maybe 20 years old, 21 years old. He finds out, he doesn't know nothing about it. He finds out that the king has some kind of dream. He can't remember it, and he's going to kill every single one of them. And yet Daniel has counsel and insight. And he goes in. He didn't ask Yahweh yet. He goes in with a surety that he's going to be able to get the dream from Yahweh without knowing first if he will or not. And I guess he figured, just like as we'll see in the next chapter with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that when they were told to bow down before the king's statue, and the king was ready to throw them in the fire, and then he gave them one last chance to change their mind, he said, look, you're the king, you can do whatever you want, but we're just letting you know, no matter what, you can throw us in that fire, you can cut off our heads, we are not going to bow down to that statue. It's plain and simple. Now, I was going over this last week about the spirit of compromise, because we live in a world of compromise, and people don't even realize. And I say Babylon, we know that Mystery Babylon is United States of Babylon. But at this point in time, where we're at the end of Babylon's reign, Babylon is being destroyed because Babylon has taken that system to the whole world. So it's not just in America where you have this facade of life in everything. It's all over the world, because all over the world is this facade of internet, this facade of reality TV, and all the stuff in the world is one big reality TV set. And like I said, people really in the world today, they're not realizing what is reality and what is fake. And over here, one thing is that we get from this book is two things that we're getting so far. Number one, that these boys would not compromise. We saw it in chapter 1. No matter what was going to happen, they were not going to compromise, even to their death. And they're not old men that are 80 and 90 years old that figure they're going to die anyway. They're young boys coming in, figuring, we're either going to die or Yahweh's going to protect us, but we are not going to compromise, period. The second thing is the faith to believe that Yahweh's going to back them up. And not necessarily with what they want, right? Like Stephen. Stephen had just as much faith as Daniel, and Stephen was stoned to death as a young man, probably around 30 years old. Stephen from the book of Acts, right? Chapter 7. Where he boldly also was not going to compromise in telling the faith, and he wound up dying for his faith. That's the way he glorified Yeshua. Some of us may die for our faith and glorify Yeshua. Some of us may get taken out of that lion's den and glorify Yeshua that way. But at the end of the day, fear will stop you from this. There shouldn't be any fear in a believer at this point. We are so close to the kingdom. This facade of the world, of Satan's system that's out there, we should want nothing to it. And Satan has nothing on us as long as we keep our faith. What can he fear us with? Don't fear him who could take the body, but fear him who could take the body and soul and destroy it in Gehenna. So we need to have the faith of Daniel. As this book is being opened now, and Yahweh is revealing this book, it's not just about knowing prophecy. It's not just about knowing a good time frame of when Yeshua is returning, because we will know it from this book. There's a real good time frame to show us that. It's about showing us the living faith that most of the world doesn't have, that we should have here. So, wow, Daniel goes in and asks the king, and assuredly, and you know what? Didn't the other magicians and astrologers ask the same thing? Didn't they say, give us some time? And what did he say? You're wasting my time. You're just buying. You're lying. You're trying to buy for time. No. Why would he give Daniel more time? Because Daniel went in with confidence. Because Daniel went in faith, and Nebuchadnezzar believed him that he was going to come back with an answer. So then Daniel goes to his house and declares the thing to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, right, his three friends, his companions, that they might pray for the mercies of Eloah in heaven about the secret, that Daniel and his companions should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So think about this. The next time you have a problem and you don't want to ask people for prayer, because here's Daniel, right, who had all the faith in the world. to go in there and tell Nebuchadnezzar, no, I'll go before Yahweh and I'll get you your answer. And then when he comes out, what's the first thing he does? He goes to other brethren and asks them to pray with him. Because collective prayer is powerful, right? And sure, we could pray ourselves and we could pray with our family, but collective prayer is powerful. And whenever there's something that's really important, we should be asking for collective prayer. If we go to Esther 4 in verse 16, the book of Esther, 4th chapter in verse 16. We know the book, right? We know the story when the Jews are going to be destroyed because of Haman, evil Haman. And then look what happens. Verse 15, Esther said to take back to Mordecai. So this is what she's saying, to go back and tell Mordecai when he's asking her to go for the king on behalf of the people. She says, go gather all the Jews being found in Shushan and fast for me. And do not eat or drink 3 days, night or day. My maidens and I will also fast in this way. And so I will go into the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perished. Right? Because if you go before the king and he doesn't call you, even if you're the queen, that's the end of it. Unless he puts out the scepter to you. So here it is. This is what's going on. And yet she went in there because she had the faith to do it. But what did she do? She knew she was human. She knew she was weak. And she went and she asked for the people to fast and to pray for her and with her. The same thing here with Daniel. So this is, as we're going into the end time here, we've turned a corner. And I'm going to start giving messages very soon on the wilderness, new messages, all the way up into the feast. I have many messages at Sukkot also to give on this. But as we're getting into this time, we got to realize that the day has changed. We got to realize the cloud has moved. We got to realize we are in a new time in the end times here. We're in a new time in the end times here. And we have to embrace this. And a big part of that is having a living faith. Never wavering or doubting. Never having fear is not even a word that's in Hebrew. It shouldn't be a word in our vocabulary. But at the same rate, not doing it out of pride or self-righteousness, because I've seen a lot of people do that, even when they're sick. Oh, I know I'm going to be healed. I know I'm going to be healed. And then they're dead a short time after that. It's not about knowing you will be healed. It's knowing you can be healed. It's knowing that Yahweh is sovereign. He's in control. And whatever he doesn't owe us anything. So it's not meaning what we want is going to come out. It's meaning whatever comes out, we trust him. We never bring doubt to anything because whatever happens is his will and all we do is go with it. So when the cloud moves, we go with the cloud because we're not the one making the agenda. We're the one trying to follow in the footsteps. So this is the time we're living in now, and this is the time that we're learning from Daniel and his friends. And then we get into verse 19. Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in the night vision, and Daniel blessed the Eloah of heaven. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of Elohe forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changes the times and the seasons. Well, that's a really interesting scripture. He changes the times and the seasons. Yahweh's the only one, right? What does it say when they were asking Yeshua when his return is? What did he say? It's not for you to know the times and the seasons that the Father put into his own hands, that not even the Son knows. I think he probably knows now. He didn't know at that time, but I bet you he knows now when it is. But he says there are things that only the Father knows. He changes the times and the seasons. He causes kings to pass away, and he sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who know understanding. So Yahweh is sovereign in everything. So it's not about us thinking we know what he's going to do. It's about us accepting what he is doing. In Daniel 4:17, he says, This matter is by the decree of the guarding cherubs and the command by the word of the holy ones, so that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he wills, and he sets up over it the lowest of men, right? Maybe that was a prophecy about President Trump. That's what they try to say. He's not like any other president. But Yahweh sets up over the kingdoms whoever he sees fit. So there's no accidents. And it's really, really interesting because you could pretty much guess with this global government that we're going to be getting into here shortly, you could pretty much guess over the last probably even close to 50 years, there really haven't been a lot of surprises as far as presidents. I wasn't around when JFK, John F. Kennedy, was president. Wasn't even born yet. But maybe that was a surprise at that time. But I know when you're going into President Johnson and President Nixon, Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, and then the Bushes, certainly from the Bushes and Clintons and the other Bush, there's been no surprises whatsoever. Obama, he was groomed as a young man because everything's been part of this New World Order plan. And then all of a sudden comes along President Trump, who was not part of that plan. And he's not a globalist, So he may have his faults, but he certainly isn't a globalist. And now we're in new uncharted territory, because now it gets exciting, because it's not the same old thing that they're doing. And now Yahweh is doing something. So now Yahweh's involved. And I find it exciting because if Hillary Clinton would have won the presidency, I think we'd be in a whole different situation here now. And probably either in World War III already or really, really close to these things. But Trump has given, President Trump, Yahweh has given a whole new reprimand for this. And we'll talk about that in another message with the 7 good years and 7 bad years. But we see that the point of it is that Yahweh puts in whoever he deems to be the person he wants in there. So back now to verse 22 of Daniel 2. He reveals the deep and secret things, right? Yahweh reveals. And what does it say? It's Yahweh's pleasure to hide a matter, and it's the king's honor to seek it out. He reveals the deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells in him. Wow. I thank you and praise you, O Elo of my fathers, who has given me wisdom and might, and has made me know what we ask of you. For you have revealed to us the king's matter. Then Daniel went into Arioch, whom the king had chosen to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said to him, "Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the meaning to the king." Then Arioch quickly brought Daniel in before the king and spoke this to him. "I have found a man of the captives of Judah who will make the meaning known to the king." So what does this show you too? This shows you that Arioch has to trust in Daniel, right? Because for him to be able to go into the king and say, "Wait a second, I found a guy," how does he know? What if Daniel comes up with a dud and it's not true? Then Arioch's also, his head's going to, what you bring me this guy for? Right? So he's also got to trust in Daniel. And it shows our reputation. It shows how important our reputation is. Because if your reputation is good, then when you say something, people are going to listen. If your reputation is bad and you don't go by your word, then nobody's going to trust you. Right? So here he is. He tells him he found a man here who can tell the meaning. Verse 25. Then Arioch quickly brought Daniel in before the king and spoke this to him. "I have found a man of the captives of Judah who will make the meaning known to the king." The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, that's what they're calling Daniel, that's what the king named him, "Are you able to reveal to me the dream which I have seen and its meaning?" Daniel replied before the king and said, "The secret which the king has demanded cannot be shown to the king by the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, or the stargazing ones. But there is a Elo in heaven who reveals secrets and makes known to King Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days." So if you go to Genesis 40 and verse 8, we see the same thing with Joseph. Joseph's dream, or Pharaoh's dream with Joseph. Genesis 40 and verse 8 said, "And they said to him, 'We have dreamed a dream, and there is not one to open it.' And Joseph said to him, 'Do not interpretations belong to Elohim? Now tell it to me.'" And I said this years ago when people asked, why don't we see as many miracles as happened in the first century? I mean, recently we're seeing a lot of them. We're even seeing the blind seeing again, the deaf having their ears open. We're seeing people with cancer get healed, all kinds of miraculous things that are going on. But for years, we didn't see so much of it. I saw it in Israel, but I would travel and people would ask, why don't we see it so much? And I would say, one of the reasons why we don't see that is because you have to be a mature believer for Yahweh to allow you to be an instrument to Him. Why? Because if not, you're going to take the glory to yourself. You're going to think it's you. If Yahweh gives me the ability to use me like a tool, like a hammer, and I could put my hands on somebody and they could be healed, right? And then people start thinking you have some kind of power in you, and they start coming, please heal me, please do this, please do that. Vanity can come in very, very quickly if you're not a mature believer. And that's why Yahweh wouldn't give somebody that power unless they're mature. And these men here are mature, that they see, no, it's not me, it's Yahweh. And as we get older, I think we mature more. I think anybody that's young would have to admit that there's pride there when you're younger and you're doing things and you have abilities. But as you get older, you really, really see we really have no ability. Any ability you have is just something Yahweh gave you that He could have given to anybody. And the only thing that really matters is your humility, the character that you're building, and the faith that you have in Yahweh. That's all that matters. And when you understand that, then Yahweh can use you more. And that's why someone like a King David, who did some horrible, horrible sins in his life, was still said to be a man after Yahweh's own heart, because he was a person that had compassion and humility and didn't look big in his own eyes. So this is what he tells them. But then this is what's important here also. And he makes known to King Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. And this is where the reason why, like I said, I'm not going to sit here for weeks and weeks and weeks and go over all the history of Babylon and the history of Medo-Persia and the history of Alexander the Great and the history of the Roman Empire. Because the primary part of this book is for the latter days. It's not just a history that happened with ancient Babylon going until the Roman Empire and the resurrections of the Roman Empire. That's something that has gone all the way through the Protestant Reformation, and it just is not the factual reality of this book. Very, very clearly here. What is the book? What is the dream about from this book? It's a dream to tell him what will happen in the latter days. In the latter days. I'll read our note here. This dream, as in most of the book of Daniel, is for the latter days or end time. There may be some dualities in Daniel that have fulfillment in its day to show the parallels of those fulfillment in the end times. But most of the prophecies and dreams in Daniel clearly state they are for the latter days. And I'm going to give you some of these scriptures here. Daniel 8 in verse 17. Daniel 8 in verse 17. And he came beside my place, and when he came, I feared and fell on my face. But he said to me, O son of man, understand, for the vision is for the time of the end. Go down to verse 26, same chapter. And the morning and evening vision was told as true, but you shall shut up the vision, for it is for many days. It is for many days. Go on to Daniel 10 in verse 14. Daniel 10 in verse 14. Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision is yet for many days. Okay, it's the latter days. And one more over here, Daniel 12, 11 through 13. Daniel 12, 11 through 13. And from the time of the continual sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination of desolation set up. There shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and reaches to the 1,335 days. And since this is chapter 12, I'm going to say, blessed are you who waits till we get to chapter 12, which could be a couple of months. But you go on to the end, for you shall rest and stand for your lot at the end of the days. So this is where most of the historians miss it. This is where a lot of the pastors miss it. They don't understand that the only reason why some of this stuff had a historical parallel was to show us what we could see today as we look at some of these kingdoms, like Babylon, right? That Babylon's a head of gold, and we see that it was a prosperous, rich empire, the way modern day America Babylon is the same, and we can compare the two. But this is for the end time, and here we are. And that's what makes it exciting, because now this book is opened. Now we could read this book, and not everything, because some things haven't happened yet. So if there's specific prophecies about people meeting, or someone's daughter even marrying someone that hasn't happened yet, I'm not going to speculate who that might be. But I can say there's a lot of things in this book that are open now that we're going to get into that are amazing, that are really, really amazing for the times we're living in. So it's a book for the latter days. It's a book for the latter days. Continuing here in verse 29 of Daniel 2. As for you, O king, your thoughts came on your bed. What should happen after this? And the revealer of secrets makes known to you what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living man, but so the meaning might be made known to the king, and that you might know the thoughts of your heart. So this is what he's telling him. This is why he's sharing it with him. And it's really interesting. Why didn't Yahweh just show Daniel the dream, right? Why would he show it to Nebuchadnezzar, a Gentile? Same as he showed it to Pharaoh, who was a Gentile. And he tells him right here, right? That I have more than any, but so that the meaning might be made known to the king, and that you might know the thoughts of your heart. So this is why, as a testimony, he's given it to him. You, O king, were seeing, and behold, a certain great image. That great image stood before you with a brilliant brightness, and its form was terrifying. So this is the first thing we get now, right? Because here, he's not going to tell what this whole image is. We're not going to get into the symbolism that we're going to see in Daniel 7. I wasn't sure if I'd get into it today at all, but I'm not. We will when we get to Daniel 7. But right now, basically, he's just showing him the image. We'll interpret it later, but we're going to see the image. And what we see is, right, and this is why I say, it's not about a 500-year history. That's not what this is about here, or a 600-year history, or maybe even a 1,000-year history. Because there's one image. There's only one image. So these four parts of this image are part of the same image. So in the end time, there's one image here, and we'll see what this is in a minute. The head of the image was of fine gold. Its breasts and its arms were of silver. Its belly and its thighs were of bronze, and its legs were of iron. Its feet were partly of iron and partly of clay. I'll read our note here again. There is one image made up of four different entities. This is showing that in the end time there will be one global world empire, but with four different entities leading it at different periods until the end. The fact that the empire will go from gold to silver to bronze to iron shows that as the end time will progress, things will physically and economically get worse and worse until the end. And we're on that cusp right now. I am working on something for our congregations and our communities about quickly starting this year for the Shemitah, already starting to store food and put things together, because when these 7 good years are over and we hit those 7 bad years, they are going to come like a boulder on this world who's not expecting it. And what's interesting is we've lived so long now. We're living in 70 years in this Babylonian system, which everything is about money. It doesn't matter whether it's politics. It doesn't matter whether it's religion. Every single thing is about money. Pastors, it's all about money. Everything is about money. And when Babylon falls, people don't realize how quick we're going to go to silver and then to bronze and then to iron, right? Silver is, if you look now, gold is around $1,400 an ounce. That's a lot of money for one little ounce of metal. Silver is only $15 an ounce. So the difference between gold and silver is major. And then bronze is way less than that, and iron is, iron you use for scrap metal, you give it in. So when this happens, it is going to move very, very quickly, and the world as we know it today, and people running to and fro, and all of this pleasure seeking will be gone when Babylon's gone. That's part of the Babylonian society and the Babylonian system. And then in verse 35, he says, then the iron, the clay, the bronze, and the silver, and the gold were together crushed to pieces. All together, right? It's one image. It's not over 1,000 years. It's one image that's all there at the same time, and it's crushed to pieces, and they became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, so no place was found for them. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Right? Clearly, we'll see from verse 44, this is the kingdom of Yahweh coming. So how could this be historical of Babylon, Medo-Persia, Alexander the Great, and the Roman Empire when it's Yeshua's return that destroys these 4 kingdoms, and all 4 are there at that time? So these are 4 kingdoms in the end time, and we're going to talk about who they are. Because they're all part of this global United Nations beast power. And I don't know when Babylon falls if they're going to call United Nations. They might change it and call it something else. But it'll be a global government. We already know it. It's already there. All this stuff is already set up. And how does it get destroyed? By a stone that struck the image, became a great mountain, and filled all the earth. He's talking about the kingdom of Yahweh. Let's go into a couple of scriptures to see this. Revelation 17:9. Just want to show you that mountains in Bible in the Bible do represent large landmass, like with Babylon. She sits on 7 mountains, 7 large land places. Revelation 17 verse 9. Here is the mind having wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains where the woman sits on them, meaning 7 continents of the world. That Babylon is controlling the whole world. Here, though, the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled all the earth. Clearly, it's talking about Mount Zion. That's where Yahweh reigns from. That's where Yeshua will reign from. So Isaiah 11:9. Isaiah 11:9. They shall not do evil nor destroy in all my holy mountain, Mount Zion, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of Yahweh as the waters cover the sea. Let's go to Micah 4:1. Book of Micah 4:1. But it shall be in the end of days, right? Here we are. What does he say? This vision is for the end of days. It shall be in the end of the days, the mountain of the house of Yahweh, Mount Zion, shall be established on the top of mountains, and it will be lifted up from the hills, and people shall flow unto it. Right? So this is what we're talking about here. Yeshua return destroys these kingdoms. Isaiah 52 in verse 10. Isaiah 52 in verse 10. Yahweh has bared his holy arms in the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see Aleph Tav, Yeshua our Elohim. So this is when he returns, right? Every eye will see him. And the last scripture is Isaiah 49 and verse 6. Isaiah 49 and verse 6. And he said, it is too little that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved ones of Israel. I will also give you my Yeshua to be a light of the nations to the end of the earth. So we know that it starts in Mount Zion, but Yeshua's reign will be over all the earth, just like it struck here. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So in the days of these kingdoms, in the end time, and we'll see who these kingdoms are, we see that Yeshua will return, destroy them, and his kingdom will go on forever. This is the dream, and we will tell the meaning of it before you, the king. You, O king, are the king of kings, for the Eloah heaven has given you the kingdom, the power, and the strength, and the honor, right? Mystery Babylon. And I say it's interesting. I don't know how anybody can't see that America is end-time Babylon. Number one, there's no such thing as a church. There's no word church in your Bible. Church is a pagan name. To try to say that Babylon is a church is ridiculous. When 12 times it says it's a nation. And not only is it a nation, it's a nation with the most powerful military in the world. It's a nation that is filled with pleasure seekers. But it's also a nation that is the most powerful economic steam engine that has ever been. They name, 17 things, 18 things in Revelation 18 that Babylon trades more than anybody else. They're the only ones that has a commodity exchange to trade those things. So I don't know how anyone can't see. And we're in the end of their 70-year reign. Where Babylon's ready to get destroyed. Before this, when Babylon started, after World War II, and this whole thing was set up to the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, I went over these statistics before, that America basically controlled half to 3/4 of all the world's resources, including gold and silver and magnesium and all these things that they did. So I don't know how anyone who is honest with it can't see that America is end-time Babylon. We have lesson 15 on that if somebody wants to go over that. But he's saying him to hear, that he is the one. And wherever the sons of men, the animals of the field, and the birds of the sky dwell, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. Babylon is the head of gold. That's why that's why the poorest person in the world today is living better than a king did, 1,000 years ago. Just look at indoor toilets. Kings didn't even have that thousands of years ago, right? Because of modern technology, the poorest people in the world today are living better than kings did because of Babylon. That Babylon brought all these things to the world. Babylon is the head of gold. And in your place will rise another kingdom lower than yours, Medio-Persia. We'll see, that's the second kingdom. Who was Medio-Persia? the Medes and the Persians. Just look on a map. It's the Russians and the Iranians, right? Who is coming against America right now? The Russians and the Iranians. And we'll see also with the great dragon, who is China. China with them. And then the third kingdom of bronze, who we see is named as Greece, the EU. And then the fourth kingdom, the kingdom of iron, which was the type, was Rome, because they were the first world empire. But in the end, it's world government. So it's not one nation, it'll be a world government, something, like I said, they'll use United Nations, or they might call it something else, but it'll be a world power. And we'll see as we get to Daniel 7, it talks about 7 heads and 10 horns. We'll see how that all sets up with the United Nations. And in your place shall rise another kingdom lower than yours, and another third kingdom of bronze, which will rule on all the earth. And the fourth kingdom will be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and smashes all things. As the iron that shatters all these, it will be crushed and shattered. So, like I said, in Daniel 7, we'll get into specifics of all this. Right now, I'm just going over the dream itself. But we see the 4 kingdoms that are there. Babylon, USA, Russia and Iran, the EU, and then world government that comes from there. And as to that you saw, the feet and the toes were partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. The kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of iron, because you saw the iron mixed with clay of the potter. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. And as you saw the iron mixed with the clay of the clay, they shall be mixed with the seed of men, but they shall not adhere to one another, even as iron does not mixed with clay. And this is really interesting because the end times started after World War II. World War I was supposed to be the war to end all wars. It didn't happen. World War II came. Out of World War II came what? It came Israel being a nation again, 1948, which is the major sign of the end time. Watch the fig tree. Israel's the fig tree. But we don't talk so much. We talk a lot about Israel, right? Because that's important. That's the main biblical sign. But also over here, we have to look at, in 1945, United Nations started. That's when it started. So did the World Bank, so did the International Monetary Fund, and all the things of Babylon that was created out of there. So all of this started at the end of World War II. So why does he say, about the kingdom will be divided, and it'll be partly strong like iron and partly weak like clay, and like the same, and he says that these are men, but as they do not adhere to each other, as iron does not mix with clay, and it literally says, that they are men. What does he mean by this? Well, at the end of World War II, and I'm going to read it over here, in our verse, in our number 5 footnote, it says, when this end-time global government was established by the United Nations after World War II, Dwight Eisenhower from the USA sat down with Nikita Khrushchev and divided Europe. We know that. Half of it went communist, half of it went socialist. The socialist part became strong and the communist part was weak and eventually fell, but they did not mix with each other. Eisenhower, ironically, means iron, and Khrushchev means clay. So very interesting. Wow, you can't have a more direct fulfillment to the scripture than even the name of the 2 men who did this. One was named iron and one was named clay. The 2 men that literally divided Europe up and did that. So amazing that that's exactly how it happened. Then look, verse 44 again. And in the days of these kings, right? In the days of these kings. So is this something that's happening over 1,000 years? No. When these kings of these 4 different entities are set up, the Elo of heaven shall set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall crush in pieces and make an end to all these kingdoms and shall stand forever. So this is not historical. In the days of these kings, and right now all 4 of these entities are here. We'll see that when we get to Daniel 7. Daniel 7 is made up, the United Nations, 7 heads, right? 5 permanent members, and then a secretary general and a rotating president. Who are the 5 permanent members? Just like it says, the Lion with eagle wings, America and Great Britain. The leopard, France. The bear, Russia. And the dragon, China. They're the 5 members of the Security Council. And they're there today. And it says, in the days of these kings, in the days of this United Nations, in the days of this global government, the Eloah of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. It hasn't happened yet. So this is not historical. Only in part, of course. The historical part was a type. But here we are today, as Yahweh is opening up the book. Because you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold in pieces, the great Eloah has made known to the king what shall occur after this. And the dream is certain, and the meaning of it is trustworthy, right? The dream is certain, and the meaning is trustworthy. Daniel 12 and verse 4. Daniel 12 and verse 4. It says, but you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book to the end time. Many will travel back and forth and knowledge will be increased. So he says the dream is certain and the meaning is trustworthy and it's for the end time. The book is to be sealed until the end time. And what does he say? What's one of the signs? People will be traveling back and forth. I was saying that to Elder Mutai when we were just on this recent trip. You know, I took 8 different airplanes in all different countries, the poorest countries to richer countries. It didn't matter where I was. It didn't matter if it was the poorest country or the richest country. Every single plane was completely packed. Every airport was completely filled. I mean, it amazes me where people in the third world that are making $1 a day get money to travel on airplanes. But every single place you go in the world is the same way. There has never been travel. There was an article I sent in one of our world news updates a few weeks back about how the airline industry almost can't even handle it. The millions and millions and millions of people that are traveling every single day and every single month and every single year. But it's due to that and knowledge being increased, you know. I mean, if you think about that, I mean, it's Mumbai. We're so used to it that we say, oh, yeah, well, before they didn't have airplanes, they didn't have cars. Just think on the basic level, right? Before 100 years ago, did the basic person on this earth know what a coral reef looked like? Did they understand what stars look like or can see it through telescopes? And most people have a telescope that can see up there. But when you look today through things like the BBC and these other programs and videos that are made, you can actually go anywhere in the world. You can go to the polar caps and you can see the polar bears and you can see everything in this world. The knowledge that's there to the average human being has never been like that ever in the history of the world. The things that we know, you know, are more than anything. And it goes back to that. And it's all for the end time. It's for the time that we're living in. Verse 46. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and worshipped Daniel, and he commanded an offering, even to offer incense to him. Now this is kind of amazing, right? If you really think about it, here's Nebuchadnezzar, right? This really proudful king that likes to, we're going to see in a couple, even the next chapter, he likes to make these big golden images to himself. I think a Trump Tower, it's all gold. Trump's apartment, President Trump, is all made of gold. They have that in common too. President Trump and King Nebuchadnezzar, they both loved gold. But here it is, this king who loved gold, he loved himself. He's ready to kill every person because they can't tell his dream. He prostrates himself and bows down and worships Daniel. It says, the king fell on his face and worshipped Daniel. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? Verse 47, the king answered Daniel and said, your Elohim truly is Eloah of Elohim and master of kings and a revealer of secrets, since you could reveal the secret. That he worships Daniel for revealing it, and he worships Yahweh as the Eloah of heaven. And can you imagine, today, you can't even read a verse in a school. You know, everybody wants to say freedom of religion, and they all want to say that they're Christian, they're this. But then you can't even read a verse. Do you really think there's any world leader in the world today, anywhere, name me one country that there's a world leader who truly believes in Yahweh that he would do this? That if a real prophet came to him and gave a prophecy that he would change something, stop a war, start a war, do whatever. No, because they don't believe. None of them believe. That's why I say it's a form of religion, but they're denying the power thereof. It's all a sham. It's all Babylon. It's all a big facade. But nothing is real except the true believers. And that's why Yahweh says, if it wasn't for the true believers, he'd wipe everybody out. But for the believers' sake, he won't. So Nebuchadnezzar does this. And you want to know something? If you look back in Israel, all throughout the years of ancient Israel, did they follow the prophets? No. They stoned the prophets. They killed the prophets. Their own prophets that Yahweh sent that they knew came from Yahweh. When that prophet came, did they bow down to Jeremiah or Isaiah and say, wow, they tried to kill him? Let's go and just look at one example. In Jeremiah 19. Jeremiah 19. What happened to Jeremiah, when he just gave the same? Because remember, Daniel is not prophesying to Nebuchadnezzar good things. He's saying your kingdom is going to end, and then there's going to be somebody else who overtakes you. And what does Nebuchadnezzar do? He bows down and worships him because he believes it. And yet we go to Jeremiah 19. Jeremiah 19, verse 14 and 15, right? And this is when Jeremiah is prophesying because of the sins of Israel, what's going to happen to them. And look what happens. Then Jeremiah came from Tophet, where Yahweh had sent him there to prophesy. Right? So Yahweh sent him. They know he's a prophet of Yahweh. And he stood in the court of the house of Yahweh, and he said to all the people, so says Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, behold, I will bring to this city and on all its towns all the evil that I have spoken against it, because they have stiffened their necks in order not to obey my words. So that's pretty clear what he's telling them. Now, did they bow down and worship him? Did they say, oh, Jeremiah, we're going to worship you because you come from Elohim? No. Look what happens. Chapter 21 and 2. When Pashur the son of Emer, the priest, who also was chief officer in the house of Yahweh, so this is actually a priest, a Levite, heard Jeremiah prophesying these things, then Pashur struck Jeremiah the prophet and put him in the stocks in the upper Benjamin gate, which was by the house of Yahweh. No, he strikes him and puts him in the stocks. And then look at verse 7. O Yahweh, you have deceived me. Yea, I was deceived. You are stronger than I, and you have prevailed. I am a laughing stock all day long, and everybody mocks me. So here's a real prophet of Yahweh, and they're mocking him. They're mocking him. For whenever I speak, I cry out, I proclaim violence and ruin. For the word of Yahweh has been to me a reproach and mockery all day long. And I said, I will not mention him or speak any more in his name, because he was so tired of being mocked and treated this way. But his word was in my heart like a burning fire shut up in my bones. And I was grieved of holding in. And I was not able to not speak. And I heard the slanders of many. Terror is all around, exposed. Yea, let us expose him. Every man of my peace watched for my fall, saying, perhaps he will be lured away, and we will prevail against him, and we will take revenge on him. Wow. So this is what the prophets had to do. Even Yeshua, remember what Yeshua said? Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you killing the prophets and stoning those sent to you. I wish I could have grabbed you like a mother hen, but you refused it. So even Israel, that actually was the people of Yahweh, they didn't even do what Nebuchadnezzar did because they never believed. That's Israel's problem. Hebrews 3, what does it say? Why didn't they enter into the promised land? For lack of faith. And remember, everything's getting back to the wilderness now. And I say there's no way to the promised land except through the wilderness. And one thing we got to learn in the wilderness is that is the big lesson, that they lacked faith. And faith is not something you work up. It's not something you say. It's something you do. The deeds is the evidence of your faith. That's what the book of Jacob says. You shouldn't even have to think about it because it's burning in your heart. There's only one thing that's true, and everything else out there is a facade. And what are you living for? You're living for the facade, or you're living for the truth? So here we see, right, that this king gives honor to Daniel, a pagan, Gentile king, and Elohim's own people through the ages have stoned and killed his own prophets because they didn't want to hear the truth. Verse 48, then the king made Daniel great and gave many gifts to him, and he made him ruler over all the province of Babylon and chief of the prefects over all the wise men of Babylon. Just not going to go there, but if you're writing notes, Genesis 41, 39 through 44, because it's the same thing that happened to Joseph, right? Same thing. That Pharaoh, after Joseph interpreted the dream, he said, and how did Pharaoh know? Think about it. Joseph comes to Pharaoh and he says, Well, this is your dream. There's going to be 7 good years and 7 bad years, and the dream is 1. And during the 7 good years, you better stock up food because when the 7 bad years come. And Pharaoh believed him. Everything they did for 7 years was in the belief of Joseph's dream. He believed it. He believed it. And here we are in the end of days. And we're at the same point. This is paralleling itself. We are at the same point right now. We're going through those good years quickly, and that bad time is coming. And unfortunately, once it's here, it will not turn back again. And this is why if we believe the deeds of the evidence of our faith, we better start. And I'm not talking about going out and being a preppy, or whatever they call it, prepper, and storing all this food and all this other stuff. Not to say there's anything wrong with it, because we will have a plan for our communities and kibbutzes. I'm talking about building faith in Yahweh. I'm talking about believing Him with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength, and living every single day to that kingdom. And this is what we're getting out of here. That even the pagan king believed this, right? Then the king made Daniel great and gave many gifts to him, and he made him ruler over all the province of Babylon, the way Joseph was ruler over all of Egypt, and chief of the prefects over all the wise men of Babylon. And Daniel asked of the king, and he said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, right? His inner circle. And I always say it's interesting. I say you should have an inner circle with about 3 people, and here it is, 3 people. It doesn't have to be. Sometimes it could be 5. Sometimes it could be 1 or 2. But you need an inner circle. You need people that you can trust with your life and that you can go to and ask counsel for. The way I have the 5-man council from Jerusalem. You need this. You need people, especially in the days we're living in, to be able to go and get counsel, because decisions now are going to be life and death. We're really in a time where decisions are important. So Daniel asked the king. He sets his friends over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. So his friends had a good position, but Daniel sits in the gate of the king. 2 Samuel 19:8, because sitting in the gate of the king meant something, right? Because who sat in the gate was the king. 2 Samuel 19:8, and this is when David, after the war, when Absalom was killed, and David was crying and mourning for his son being killed. And what happened? The people were sad because they just want a victory, and here's the king being upset. And Joab comes in and says, well, this isn't good. These people risk their life for you, and you're sitting there. You better get out there and show them you're the king. If you don't go out and be strong, you're going to lose everybody. And look what happens. Verse 8 of 2 Samuel 19. And the king rose up and sat in the gate. And they announced it to all the people, saying, behold, the king is sitting in the gate. And all the people came in before the king, and Israel had fled, each one to his tents. Because you know what? During the war, the king isn't sitting in the gate. That's what happened. When war comes, the king goes to the bunker. I remember during 9/11, they got President Bush and Vice President Cheney. They were in underground bunkers in Wyoming. That's where kings go, or leaders. When you have war, they got to go to a safe place. But when the king is sitting in the gate, what does that show? It shows peace. It shows prosperity. It shows the people are happy. The people are calm. And here's Daniel sitting in the gate of the king. Wow. What a chapter. What a chapter. And this is only laying the foundation. We didn't really even start getting into this beast and what it does and all the other things. I mean, this is the only book that I know of in the whole Bible that you actually have, except maybe Revelation, if you want to say the 2 witnesses, if they are the 2 arch cherubs, Gabriel and Michael. But this is the only book I know beside that in the entire Bible where you actually have Gabriel and Michael, 2 arch cherubs that are named, that are coming, that are doing things. So there's a lot of action happening in the book of Daniel, and we have only just begun. So I think it's a great time to go over this. As like I said, the cloud has moved. Yahweh has taken his people to the wilderness, and here we are in Daniel that is coming alive. So Yahweh bless. Shabbat Shalom. Tomorrow we will have a message for you. So anytime after 12 o'clock Jerusalem time, you can go online and you can have service with us. Yahweh bless. Shabbat Shalom.